Hi, AP Chemistry students. This is Mrs. Hanson. A lot of you missed today's class due to your class meeting, so I wanted to catch you up to speed on what you need to know to successfully use your lab notebooks. I'm so sorry that this video is only audio, but that's all we got to work with for today. So please make sure that you're looking at the document that you see on your screen, the Advanced Placement Chemistry Laboratory Report Guidelines. Please, 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 you need to read the general guidelines, those bullet points, super carefully. Some things that might jump out at you. Yes, you do have to use blue or black ink. Yes, you have to make sure your name's on your lab notebook someplace. Yes, this third bullet is really important. If you make a mistake, that is totally acceptable. Our lab notebooks are rough drafts. So please, if there's something you want to cross out, don't obliterate it. Just take your pen and put a line through it. Ms. Schneider and I should be able to see what you had, all your mistakes, just as much as we want to see your corrections. So just cross it out gently. Also, with white space, let's say you're using your lab notebook and you use half the page. What do you do with all that white space? Put a big X through that white space. That's just because we don't want to think that you would ever go back and falsify data or add to your results. So we're trying to get you used to using a real lab notebook like a research scientist would, maybe working at a company or for a university. Okay? Please read all the other bullet points. One other thing to point out is that do not crunch all your information into a small space. Space things out. It's a rough draft. You will add to your labs. You will always be revising them and making them better. Okay, so you want to leave some blank spaces here. Very few students run out of pages in their lab notebooks. Okay, and some don't even use half the pages. So please space it out so you can make additions and so it's easier to read for Ms. Schneider and I. Okay, you do need to fill out the table of contents, follow the directions. Okay, as we look to the bottom for this lab that we're going to do next week, the molar mass of a volatile liquid. You got that lab lab guideline. Okay, so pull that out too. That tells you exactly what you need to do by your 7th bell lab day. Okay, so if you look down on the lab report guidelines, you have to have parts 1 through 8 done by the time you report for 7th bell lab next week. Okay, so what that means is real simple stuff like lab information, read the guidelines to see exactly what you need to do for that. Okay, the purpose. You guys see where it says purpose? You guys are following along with me, right? For purpose, this is a little different. You actually have 2 distinct purposes. One is data-driven, one is concept-driven. For the hydrogen lab that you did the other day, for your data-driven goal, it would be like, what outcome do you want in this lab? So for instance, for the hydrogen lab, it would be, the data-driven goal was to generate an assigned volume of hydrogen gas. Okay, that's what was supposed to come out of that lab. Now, the concept-driven goal is something like more what you're supposed to learn. You might say, I'm going to learn how to apply gas law formulas in an experimental setup, okay, or an experimental setting, something like that. Okay, so make sure that you have 2 purposes for each lab that we do. The researchable question is not applicable for this lab that we're going to do next week. Okay, keep going. If you flip to the next page, pre-lab questions, yes, there are some. Make sure that you restate the question in the answer. We always tell our students that your lab notebook, the audience is a possible college professor that might look at your notebook and decide if you are worthy of, college lab credit. Okay, so you want to give a college professor as much detail as possible so they know what the lab is about. So please restate the question in the answer. Okay. Now 5, materials and procedure. Okay, so for next week's lab, we're doing what's called a cookbook lab. What that means is that the procedure is spelled out in nauseam, tells you exactly what to do step by step. Please do not, I repeat, do not copy the procedure in your lab notebook. It's already written out for you. Folks, we value your time. What you need to do is come up with a summary. You can use bullets or a small paragraph, a summary of what the lab's all about. Okay, and the most important part of that is it says that you have to have an illustration of the key setup for that experiment. So going back to the hydrogen lab, for instance, you would have a drawing of the eudiometer in the beaker with water and the little piece of magnesium tied with a string. Okay, but please, that picture needs to be the focal point of this procedure section. So when a college professor is looking through your notebook, that's just going to jump out at them. They're going to say, oh, yes, of course. This is a very common college level lab, okay? So please, even if you're not an artist, I know many of you are not, put some time into making sure that picture really shows what that setup is and that it's labeled and that's as clear as you can possibly make it. And make it at least a quarter of the page or bigger, okay? Don't stuff it in the corner or something like that. Okay, you don't need a materials list. It's already listed. Okay, so that's for the cookbook lab. Okay, now we'll get into the inquiry lab and, for heaven's sakes, the polish lab report. We'll spend a lot of time talking about that later. Okay, don't forget a safety section. That's number 6. It's an easy one to forget. Pre-lab calculations are not appropriate or not applicable for this lab, but sometimes you'll need them. And finally, 8, make sure you set up your data table before you come in for lab. With the data table, you know what? It's a really easy thing, but pull out a ruler and make sure that your lines are straight and it looks like you took some effort to do that. And again, I'll say it one more time, make sure you leave space. Sometimes in the data table, you might forget a column or you might forget a piece of data you have to add. You want to have the availability to make your lab reports better at all times. Okay? So I think that's it. Before I close down this video, we will talk about all the other sections of the lab report later, but you do want to read over it. Okay, but for now, by the time you come to lab next week, the molar mass of a volatile liquid using the Dumas lab, that's a lab that we're going to use to write our first lab report, okay? Ooh, I almost forgot. Little tip about using your lab notebooks. As you guys noticed, you make a carbon copy of your lab when you write in it. So I'll say this real quickly. When you look at page 1, for instance, there's a white page with a blue heading, and then following that is a white page with a yellow heading. The yellow page is the copy. Okay, so when you want to write in your notebook, you take the blue and then the yellow that follows it, okay, and then put the flap in between. If you don't have that flap in place, you are going to write on the first 20 pages. You don't want to do that. Okay, so it's going to go first page, then the copy, then the flap, and then the rest of your notebook. Okay? Make sure you use blue or black ink, and when you start writing, just take a little peek at the yellow page and make sure that the copy is coming through okay. All right, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact your teacher. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day. Bye.